Hi, Kristen. If you could state your name and who you represent.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Kristen Etter with the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'd like to start out by following the last witness, and it's true that Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid has been appointed or assigned 564 cases so far of people charged under Operation Lone Star. Of those 564 individuals, all of them except for 8 are charged with criminal trespass misdemeanor offenses alone. So that's 99.986% of our clients are being held in prison for the charges of misdemeanor criminal trespass. 358 of those were arrested in Kinney County. 206 were arrested in Valverde County. Of the 206 that have been arrested in Valverde County, we've had 30 rejections and 81 dismissals, as Mr. Martinez just testified to. And that is because I'm going to talk a little bit in some of the materials that I passed out. I'm going to talk a little bit about why these cases are being rejected and why these cases are being dismissed. But also just to kind of give you a picture of our clients. They come from all over. Many of them are here seeking asylum. They're educated. I have had a constitutional law professor from Venezuela. I've had a professional baseball player from Venezuela. We have journalists, political activists, university students. And there's really kind of 3 different areas of criminal trespass cases that we're seeing. One is the Valverde County cases. Almost all of those individuals are being arrested after they wade through the river, and they're being arrested kind of very close to the riverbank or very close. And what we've seen and what we've read, and I've reviewed several hundred probable cause affidavits and offense reports from Valverde County. Kinney County is a little bit different, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what we're seeing is DPS officers have set up on private properties, and they have equipment that allows them to watch individuals wade through the river. They have thermoscopes and other military-grade equipment, and so they're watching individuals wade across the river, and they've set up on private property. And so one of the pictures that I just passed out is in one of my cases. We had a hearing, and my client was arrested at 1:30 in the morning. So it was late at night. He was a university student from Venezuela that was here seeking asylum. And by the way, the ports of entry are all closed to asylum seekers under the Biden administration currently. So there is no mechanism for an individual who's seeking asylum to present themselves in any other way other than the manner that, for example, this client had presented himself. And that's exactly how federal law authorizes that you can present yourself. It doesn't have to be at a point of entry. The federal statute specifically states that you can present yourself in either at a designated point of entry or otherwise. So it specifically allows for that. However, in this particular case, we had a hearing, and the DPS officer testified that he arrested my client. If you see that stick that's in the ground, that was the notice that he was on private property, the alleged notice, I should say. And again, he testified it was late at night. There's no artificial light down at the border. And so there were no trespassing signs. So this wasn't a case where he climbed a fence. And I should say, very few of our cases have the proper notice requirement. Very few of our cases involve a person climbing a fence. Very few of our cases involve really any type of notice. But this was the alleged notice, this purple stick in the ground. And so that is why so many of these cases are being dismissed, because they lack probable cause to begin with. And so when we're talking about, those are our Valverde County cases. And so that was the alleged notice, and again, late at night. And so that's why I wanted to provide the committee just kind of an example of what we're dealing with and why so many of our cases are being dismissed. In addition, another case that we had that was very concerning that Mr. Martinez mentioned is we have heard reports, and several of our clients have recounted that they actually are called over by DPS officers on private property. So they wade the river and they see them because they'll flash their lights, and they're called over. And one particular case was very concerning, and it was a group of 11 people who had been found very close to the highway, and they had then been escorted about 15 to 20 minutes away from where they were initially apprehended. When they were apprehended, they were cuffed together 2 by 2 in zip ties, and they were walked, or I should say escorted by agents to a ranch where they were made to climb over a 3-meter fence, zip tied and handcuffed 2 by 2.
Are these DPS officers that did this?
It was a joint operation between Border Patrol and DPS. So at this point, we're not aware. We've reported this to DPS, and they've investigated it, and so I can't speak for what their investigation bore out. But I will say that there was a canine unit also with this group with the law enforcement officers, and so after all 11 climbed the fence, they then had a canine that they were not able to bring over the fence, and so law enforcement cut the property owner's fence to allow the canine to go through. And so we raised the issue with the county attorney and with top-level DPS officers because this was a concern. And within a few hours, all of those cases were dismissed. So we've seen a lot of issues with these cases. I'll say those are kind of emblematic of our Valverde County cases. Now, our Kinney County cases are a little bit different. Our Kinney County cases, and by the way, of the 358 cases that we have in Kinney County, not one has been to court, not one has had an arraignment, not one have we been given any discovery despite multiple requests, and not one have we actually been given a charging document. So we're having a totally different experience in our Kinney County cases.
Wait. Would that seem okay? Now, what is isn't there a procedure for making sure that happens in a certain amount of time?
Yes, ma'am. So the 3914 is our discovery statute, and it states that as soon as practicable upon request, the prosecutor shall provide discovery. In some of our cases, we made a formal request, and we also file with the clerk's office. So we made a formal request more than 3 weeks ago, and we've been given nothing. We've really been given hardly, in some of our cases, we don't even have probable cause affidavits. We're not able to tell the date of arrest. We lacked really most all information on those cases. So
there are arraignments showing that the formal charges for these individuals have not even been brought?
That's correct. So the arraignment is where you would actually go to court and be able to enter a plea or request a jury trial or whatnot. None of the cases in Kinney County have actually had a court date. And so I have a client that was arrested in Kinney County on August 13th that is still in custody and has not been brought to court. And that is why we had to file the writ that we filed last week on behalf of 238 of our clients.
And they were all released?
That's correct. They were all released on personal bond.
But were they released or were they taken to ICE?
They were taken to ICE because all of them have immigration detainers.
Are any of your clients women?
No. They've stated they only arrest men.
Did the men come with their wives or daughters or anything?
Our understanding is if they are with family members, they won't be arrested. It's only single adult males. And that's in litigation, that has been what has come out in litigation.
Okay, Representative Johnson has a question.
Thank you. And I was going to ask, because I've heard that as well, that if you're a single male, you're going to get arrested. Is there any concern that this encourages people coming across the border to bring a kid with them so that they don't get arrested? And it would seem that that's kind of a poor policy on our part.
Absolutely, Representative Johnson. I think that's a concern because I think there are a lot of, unintended consequences to this operation, and that is absolutely one of them. I would be concerned about that. Our preference is that they're not arrested at all, but they've stated that the policy is that they're not going to arrest women and children because they don't have the capabilities to put them in custody. But at this point, that has been the stated intention.
Do you know if anybody is tracking, because I understand women and children in a family unit, but do you know if anybody is tracking down there how many men with young children are coming across the border that they are then letting go so that we can track whether or not we are encouraging people to bring a infant or child with them as a means of bypassing the current Operation Lone Star?
Representative Johnson, I think that's a great question. I would maybe direct to Officer McGraw or Corporal McGraw. I think if they're keeping statistics on that, they might have that. We wouldn't have access to that.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, what can be done to address this Kinney County? I mean, we have criminal code of procedure that is in place. Do you have recommendations of how we can address this? Have you been in contact with TIDC to request them to do some monitoring out there?
So Chair Collier, thanks for that question. In terms of recommendations, I think one of the issues that I've heard is that they're just overwhelmed. So I guess my advice would be to not take the case until you're prepared to actually follow the law and provide the proper procedural and constitutional protections that Texas affords to everybody. But in terms of, I think maybe, one of the other witnesses could testify as to what they can do to assist Kinney County, for example. But other than litigation, which is what we're having to resort to, I don't know of any other mechanism to make them comply.
Representative Crockett and then Hinojosa.
Thank you so much for being here. And I just want to be clear because my level of frustration has to do with how we're spending our resources. And this honestly sounds like a failed operation. And so in your experience, you've heard the goal of the operation. And the goal is to get after those traffickers, get after the cartel, things like that. And so I know that our DA that testified said, well, I don't know, which insinuates to me that there's not been a definitive link with any of these cases that he's either pled out or dismissed at this point in time. Based on your experience on the defense side with these seemingly low levels, some of these offenses are Class C trespass cases, like ticket-worthy cases, and somehow people are ending up in prison. We skipped a whole bunch of steps and got from ticket to prison, whole other issue. But based on your experience, have you defended a number of persons that are somehow tied to the goals stated about this operation?
Representative Crockett, of our criminal trespass cases, I've seen no evidence in any of our cases that we've received so far of the 564 and of the information that we've received that there's any connection at all to any kind of larger criminal activity. I will say most of our clients have never been arrested in the country before. And so I haven't seen any evidence in 99.86% of our cases, which should be Class C, Class B misdemeanor offenses, that there's any connection to human smuggling or any connection to any kind of larger cartel activity. I haven't seen it.
Okay, thank you.
So you mentioned earlier the situation about 11 defendants who were led over a fence. Why? What was the leading over the fence for?
So we weren't sure about that. What we did is we reported it to top-level DPS officers, and the way that I understood it is because they need to be on certain private property before they're arrested for criminal trespass. So not every property owner has signed these criminal trespass affidavits, and not every piece of property is private property. And so the way that it was portrayed is that they had to be on private property before they could be arrested for criminal trespass.
On specific private property before they could be arrested for criminal. What happens to the defendants you're representing once their case is dismissed? What happened? Where are they going?
So different things happen depending on what happens to their charges in their case. So for our cases that have been dismissed, they typically will release the ICE detainer. So for anybody that's not a U.S. citizen that's being detained in Briscoe and Segovia, they have ICE detainers. So for our clients that have had their cases dismissed, the ICE detainer is rescinded and they're being taken back down to the border and turned over to Customs and Border Patrol. For cases that are out on bond or that have pled to time served, they're being taken to ICE, and ICE is detaining them or releasing them. So we've had several individuals that have been released and that have been released in the United States.
Members, any other questions for the witness? Did you have anything else you wanted to share with us?
Unless there's any other questions, I can talk a little bit more about some of the other Kinney County, how we see some of the other cases, but I know it's been a very lengthy afternoon. But
Okay, Representative Crockett.
You spoke about filing writs, and the writs that you're filing presumably are under 17.151 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, which is actually I actually had a bill to shorten the amount of time that people could be incarcerated without formal charges actually being brought against them, specifically under 17.151. And so if we look at, say, a normal case outside of these, would you agree with me that the majority of prosecutors are able to bring those cases within, say, 30 days for a Class A or 15 days for a Class B misdemeanor?
Representative Crockett, primarily prior to my employment at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, I worked in Travis County, and it was very customary that the prosecutors in this county followed 17-151 and didn't seem to have a problem with it. I don't know about other jurisdictions, but.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate the information. We'd like to make sure that we stay in touch to stay updated and see the progress moving forward. But we will definitely get in touch with TIDC to see if there's some monitoring that should happen in Kinney County, because it's very concerning.
Thank you, Chair Collier. I appreciate it.
Thank you.